This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, hello. Wow, my mic is loud today. Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Is that annoying to say, like, happy Monday, happy Tuesday? I feel like it might be. I'll stop saying it. Maybe my mic is too loud. I guess I could sit back from it a little bit. See, this is really just what makes this podcast so special, is that there's no editing. It's just complete behind the scenes at all times. You guys get to hear every inner thought that I have while getting situated and set up to record, which I'd imagine some people hate. So we have a new murder story today, and it does not take place in the Southwest. And that is because I just want to take full advantage of October, Halloween month. I couldn't find one that I liked enough that had to do with Halloween and also took place in somewhere in the Southwest. So I said, screw it. And I found one that takes place in Michigan. And that's what we're going to do. There's only 2 weeks left of October. And I feel like I've not been fully soaking up the Octoberness of October. And I don't know exactly what that means. But if you know, you know. Hold on, I'm trying to adjust my chair. It's also probably because it's super fucking hot here, which doesn't feel like October. And I mean, this is my third year living here after being gone for a while. Like I lived here before and then moved away and then came back. And you'd think I'd be used to it by now, but I do think that it may be hotter this month than it has been in past Octobers, but it's never been like my ideal October, which was in Chicago. And so Michigan is pretty close to Chicago, so it kind of gives me that real fall vibe, the crisp air, the changing leaves, the kind of gloomy overcastness of when I remember October in Chicago growing up, that's what I remember. Now I realize it wasn't overcast every day, but in my head it was, like a good mix between Gilmore Girls and, I don't know. I was trying to think of this yesterday. Like, what are some good examples of movies or TV shows or even books that like really embrace and embody that, or this, like what I'm trying to talk about, this like vibe, this Halloween, and I know the word vibe annoys me, but this like Halloween, October, changing leaves, crispy air, pumpkins everywhere, a little bit spooky. I feel like there's like, Scream. Sorry, I just feel like I yelled into the microphone. The movie Scream, like that town and the music, and it kind of gives me that fall vibe that I'm looking for. Gilmore Girls, every episode that takes place in October, definitely. And there are others, but I can't totally think of it. But that's what I'm going for. Since I don't live in a place where that actually happens, because it's still about 100 degrees outside and there are no leaves that are changing any color or anything like that. I'm going to do a story that takes place in a place that gives me those feelings, because those are the feelings I really want to hang on to and enjoy for the next 2 weeks. Although I was looking at the weather, and so this weekend, this is my big excitement for the week, guys. This Friday, the high is 75 here, and it looks like it might even rain. And Saturday, the high is 74. At night, it's supposed to get down to 49. So I told Mark, like, this Saturday, it is corn maze for sure. Because then the following weekend, and I mean, who can really predict the weather like 2 weeks out? I don't know. don't think that's possible, but my weather app seems to think it is. And it looks like it's going to be back up in the like mid to high 80s. So I feel like this coming weekend, it is Halloween time. I'm going to like really celebrate Halloween this coming weekend. What else? I received an email that I wanted to share for anybody who lives in Arizona. This will be published prior to what this email talks about. So our lovely human GPS sent me an email and said, look, and he sent it today. So I'm assuming he means tonight. Yeah. Look west after sunset from about 6:50 to 7:30 to see the comet. There's a bright star to the left that is the planet Venus, and a semi-bright star to the right, which is named Arcturus. Almost directly between them will be the comet. And he did attach a picture so that I could see it. And he said, it's not very common that you can see it with your eyes. And I do see it in this picture. It's actually a really good picture that he has here. So I'm definitely going to look tonight between 6:50 and 7:30. And I just wanted to tell anyone else that you should also look. And I'm going to write that down. The comet, because I want to, when I'm done recording these, I'm always like, oh shit, I got to write a episode description. And half the time I can never remember what I talked about in the beginning. This is going to be a very short intro. I don't really have that much because I don't have any, because I still can't get my Instagram messages. Actually, I haven't checked to see if anybody messaged me on Instagram to explain it to me. Oh my God. They're back. They're all back. Literally, I just looked in my general and I can see all of these messages. So I don't know if that means that all of these lovely people, Nat, Derek, Kimberly, RJ, Steph, Jenny, Nat, Taylor, Jess, Josie, Micah. I don't know if that means that you guys all messaged like since yesterday and then they reappeared or what, but I am very excited. Okay, so that's what I will be doing this evening after recording this. Yes. Okay, then I'll have more things to talk about. But I did want to share that about the comet, and then also Natalie on Patreon must have listened to yesterday's bonus, and she said that she's been to Jerome many times. Cute little stores, a sweet shop with the best peanut butter fudge, which is my favorite. Peanut butter and chocolate together are like, and she said she stayed at the haunted hotel there once, and that the haunted hamburger restaurant is to die for. And that the road to get there is even kind of twisty and turny and adventurous. So, I mean, if I wasn't already convinced, I definitely am now. So thank you, Natalie. I think we're going to try to go maybe like the week of Thanksgiving or something. Just try to be out of town for Thanksgiving. We'll see. The cat has not been on my desk all day. And now when I start recording, he comes up and he's going to start meowing and pushing my computer all over. It's really a nightmare. Okay. Well, not much has happened since yesterday. I had dinner last night at Mark's and we watched, not all of it, but part of a movie called I thought it was Cato Lake. I think it's Cato. Sorry. Cato Lake. Caddo. It's on, it's a new Max original on HBO. And it's got that guy from The Maze Runner and American Assassin. I can't remember his name. Dylan, maybe, something. It was so far really interesting, and apparently it's based on a real lake in Texas and filmed at this lake. I mean, so beautiful, so stunning. I know that doesn't really tell you much about the movie at all, like nothing, but by now, people who have been listening for a while should kind of like understand. I feel like you guys understand and know what my my movie and television taste is, tends to lean towards thriller, mystery, suspenseful, not so much horror, but a little light horror. Yeah. So it falls into those categories. And that's it. What else? I had a lot of work to do for gym today. And I feel like my voice sounds really scratchy. I don't know why, because I'm like 7 weeks without my vape e-cig thing. And I'm missing it sometimes, but feeling good. I feel like I have this cough that won't go away, but that it eventually will now that I've quit that. Like my lungs are clearing, hopefully. All right, well, this was a super lame intro. Sorry, guys. I haven't been on social. Usually I get interesting stories from, Instagram or watching TikTok. And I really haven't been on either of those for days. I need to make a note to post the weekend. Not the singer, just my weekend on Instagram and reply to messages. Is anybody else if you don't write, I have to write it down. I have 17 notebooks, and I just write things down everywhere. And I still half the time can't, forget, because I'll write it in one notebook and then the next day I'll just have the other notebook with me. So I won't, Should I just start this over? All right, I won't. I will. Let's just jump in. Let's jump in to this story today that takes place in a town called Maybe, with 2 E's at the end, Maybe, Michigan. And it was actually nicknamed the best little town in Michigan. It's pretty small, around 600 residents. So to me, that's extremely small. Everyone kind of knows each other. It's farmland. There's lots of farms, but they're all, several acres apart. The farms there produce a lot of corn and soybeans. It's located in Monroe County in the southeastern part of Michigan. Has a lot of rural charm and, retains a small town atmosphere because it is a small town. I probably would love it. 600 people is pretty small. That's less people than I had in my graduating high school class, but I would still probably like it. And what I really liked about it is I looked up pictures, and fall is so beautiful in Maybe. There's, Midwest, so tons of trees. Everything is red and orange and yellow. And in the Midwest, in autumn, it's, it's cool, crisp air, literally exactly what I'm talking about, that I'm craving. I can smell that cool, crisp air. I can feel it. And it just makes things like pumpkin picking and local fall festivals and things like that so much more enjoyable when you have that weather. Picking pumpkins, me and Mark were both wiping drips of sweat out of our face. And I was I'm sweating down my whole back. I'm getting a sunburn. So, not super fall-y, but in Maybe, Michigan, it sounds really wonderful. There's lots of different fall harvest events that have hay rides, corn mazes, pumpkin patches. There's a place called Apple Orchards and Cider Mills, which are popular destinations. Nope, that's wrong. There are lots of apple orchards and cider mills, which are popular destinations. And the specific places are Erie Orchards and a place called Cider Mills, and Westview Orchards and Winery. There's also some haunted attractions in the region, like Weird's Orchards Night Terrors, and in a place called Ypsilanti, the weirdest spelling of a town I've ever seen, and the Erebus Haunted Attraction in Pontiac, which both are easily accessible from Maybe. So that's just a little overview, but yeah, that's it. That's all I have for the overview. I just want to set the scenery of a Midwestern fall, October, because this does take place in October, right around Halloween, October of 2014. And we're going to be talking about Chelsea Bruck, who grew up in Maybe. She was the youngest of 5 kids. She had 3 sisters and a brother. People who knew her described her as friendly, just a very wholesome, sweet country girl. She was 22 at the time our story takes place. And she worked at a place called Olga's Kitchen, a restaurant at the Mall of Monroe. She worked there with her friend, Becky Brinson, and they had worked there together for several years, were very, very good friends. So the two of them were really excited to attend this huge Halloween party that takes place every year in Maybe. It was scheduled for October 25th, 2014, which was a Saturday. And the party was kind of generally known as loosely called Big Mike's Halloween Bash because it was hosted by this guy, Mike Williams. At the time, he was 31. Everyone referred to him as Big Mike. And it was held at his mother's farm. She had a huge farm, tons and tons of acres. And everyone in town knew about this. Because like I said, he threw these parties every year. He was also an entertainer. So he was a vocalist in a band called Pickaxe Preacher. And his band would play at these parties every year, in addition to playing at other parties. It was such a big party that people from out of state would come to join the festivities. Hundreds of people attended this party, which is shocking to me because if Maybe only has 600 people, then there were more people at this party than in the town, than live in the town of Maybe. So Becky and Chelsea decide they're going to go as Batman villains to this party on Saturday, October 25th, 2014. Chelsea is going to go as Poison Ivy, and she actually made her costume herself. Poison Ivy, Uma Thurman played Poison Ivy in a movie. Is it called Poison Ivy? Is the movie Poison Ivy? It might be. So she made her own costume. She worked on it for like 6 weeks. She sewed a ton of plastic ivy leaves onto this leotard. She also had green tights to go with it and red Mary Jane kind of style shoes and a plum colored wig. So she was going all out for this, and she was really proud of the costume. She also was planning to carry a jug of wine with her at the party that had a big label on it that said poison, which is super cute. So Chelsea and Becky and then their additional friend, Penny Watkins, decided to go to the party together that Saturday night. So when they got to the party, it was like huge. It was amazing. There were 2 huge tents set up in the fields. Mike was expecting about 300 people, but the word spread this year. And this year was one of the biggest parties that he'd ever had. It was between 800 and 1,000 people ended up showing up. There's actually 8 heavy metal bands that were going to play throughout the night. So it was kind of like I don't think it was officially, but it sounds like it was kind of like a battle of the band / Coachella type thing, but with metal music. So the bands played until a little after midnight. And then the event was just a party, regular party. Big Mike lit a huge bonfire. It was just a really fun, festive fall party. And so all 3 friends, Becky, Chelsea, and Penny, were all hanging out, walking around, and they decided they were chilly. They were going to try and get closer to the bonfire. And as they were walking towards the fire, Chelsea accidentally bumped her nose on like a low-hanging tent pole or maybe a low-hanging tree branch. I saw a few different accounts, but she hit her nose. Apparently her nose wasn't bleeding, but there was a mark and it really hurt. And she wanted to go home. She was like, "Oh, my nose hurts. I just want to get out of here." But her friends convinced her to stay. Finally, she agreed and they all went back to partying. Around 1 a.m. though, Penny and Becky wanted to call it a night. And Penny, before they ever got to the party, Penny had agreed to drive Chelsea home. They'd made this arrangement ahead of time. Chelsea didn't actually have a driver's license, not for any particular reason, except for the fact she didn't want one. She just thought it was easier to get other people to give her rides, which sounds terrible to me, especially in like a very rural place like this. Everything is kind of far away from each other. So always having to rely on rides, I'd imagine it would be a nightmare, but that was what she chose to do. So once Penny was ready to go home, she's looking around for Chelsea, and they kind of lost sight of each other at around the bonfire. Penny's sister also happened to be at the party, and she apparently had to work the next morning. And so she was saying to Penny, like, we got to go. I have to get home. We don't have time to look for your friend anymore. And Penny was like, all right, well, all right, we'll just go. I mean, Chelsea probably knows other people here. She'll get a ride. She'll be fine. And my initial thought was like, well, why didn't Penny call Chelsea? Or why weren't they calling each other? It's 2014, so they're cell phones. But it turns out that Chelsea had actually given her phone to Becky, like to hold on to throughout the party, because Chelsea didn't have any pockets. She wasn't carrying a purse. Like there was nowhere to put her phone. So Penny and Becky at this point run into each other, and they're like, well, where's Chelsea? Well, we don't know where Chelsea is, and we can't call her because Becky has her phone. So they were kind of like, well, she'll be fine. Like, it's a small town. Nothing ever, she'll find another ride. It's not like she's going to be stranded here. There's 600 people here. She can get a ride. So they decided to leave, and they figured Chelsea would be okay, and they'd get her phone the next day. Well, that party was the last time that Chelsea was ever seen alive. So the next evening, Chelsea's sister messaged Becky on Facebook and said, Chelsea hasn't come home. Have you heard from her? Do you know anything? And Becky said, I don't know. No, I haven't heard from her because I have her phone, but like she's probably at a friend's house. It's probably not a big deal. She's 22. It's the weekend. Maybe she slept out. They left her at the party. They're all just assuming she's fine, which when I was researching this, I was kind of like, really? Like your friend has no phone, and like you just leave them, and then you don't hear from them for 24 hours, and you're still just kind of like, yeah, it's fine. But I don't know. If I put myself in the context of like small town, everyone knows each other, yeah, I think that generally you don't tend to expect the worst. Like my first thought wouldn't be like, oh my God, she's been abducted or murdered or anything. But I don't know. Maybe that should be our first thought, I guess. Either way, I do think like leaving a friend, you all come together, you all leave together. Like, too bad if you have to work tomorrow, Penny's sister. Hang on. We're going to walk around this party until we find Chelsea. Like it's important. I do think, especially for women going out at night, drinking, to stick together. And this story is a great example of why. So by the time Monday rolls around, no one has heard from Chelsea. No one has seen Chelsea, and her family was worried. So they contacted the police. They called all of Chelsea's friends, and they even reached out to Big Mike in hopes of kind of finding some answers as to where Chelsea might be. When they got in touch with Big Mike, he told them, he was like, I've actually been receiving text messages and Facebook messages from other people, from Chelsea's friends and tons of people asking if I've seen her. And he hadn't. And even initially he sorry, I had to readjust in my chair. Initially he was like, I don't know who you're talking about, because 600 people, he doesn't personally know every single person that's showing up to his party, obviously. So he didn't like know Chelsea really well, but, and certainly couldn't like keep track of her. Why would he? But he was like, yeah, I haven't seen anybody. It's not like there's no woman left over at my house just hanging out. So even if he didn't know Chelsea personally, he would have known if like there was somebody passed out in his field or whatever. So Chelsea's friends and family asked Big Mike if he would search the fields around his mom's farm to see maybe she was injured. Maybe she passed out and then was injured or was confused, who knows? So Big Mike agreed. He took his dog and he started walking through the fields looking for her. And a couple miles into his search, his dog's foot got caught in a fox trap and injured his paw. Now I'm hating reading about this. But he carried his dog back home to, fix his paw up, tend to the injury. And when he returned to his home after just being gone a couple miles, so, an hour or so, maybe 2, got back to his home, Chelsea's mother was at his house. And he said to her, okay, you're welcome to stay, look around, do whatever you need to do, but I have to get my dog to the vet. So he did. When he came back from the vet, it wasn't just Chelsea's mom there. There were about 15 people there searching around his farm. And he was like, oh shit, like this is serious. So Chelsea's family just really leaned into the search, obviously. I mean, rightfully so. Their daughter, their sister, they haven't seen her for 2 days, super unlike her, and she doesn't have a phone, can't get a hold of her. So they committed to this search. They set up tents, generators, porta potties, not all in one afternoon or anything, but pretty quickly they set up, this was home base on Mike's farm. And they essentially were planning to stay on the farm during these search efforts until they found something. Which Mike was like, okay, yeah, I get it. Okay, fine. I'm okay with it. But then he also kind of started to feel like Chelsea's family and even the police were looking at him with suspicion. So he called his attorney. And he was like, look, it explained the situation. And his attorney was like, look, you don't have to let them stay there. It's totally up to you. You can ask them to leave. Mike was like, well, that doesn't feel like the right thing to do. I'm going to let them stay, which I think was super kind of him. Nonetheless, though, that evening, that first Monday evening, Chelsea's mother confronted Mike and straight up accused him. It was like, I know you know where she is. You have my daughter somewhere on the farm. Where is she? Is she in your basement? Is she in your trailer? I need to know where she is. And he was like, I don't know where she is. I don't really even know who she is. And despite there being upwards of 800 people at this party, which means 800 potential suspects, really. The suspicion was at this point pretty heavily directed at Mike. And by Wednesday of that first week, the media had picked up the story and began showing up at Mike's mom's farm, which, at this point was full home base command post for the search. So when Chelsea's mother spoke to the media, she mentioned that if she had known Chelsea was going to a party with over 600 people, that she wouldn't have allowed it. She said, quote, 22 or not, she would not have been going to this party if I knew. So obviously Chelsea's mom, and maybe we can assume rest of her family, didn't know that Chelsea was going to this party. Chelsea didn't tell her mom about it, which I don't know. I have a hard time with that because Chelsea lived at home. And she's been working on this costume for 6 weeks. It feels like and especially with she was the youngest, so I think she was the last one living at home, perhaps. Either way, if she was the only child at home, you would definitely think her mom would be aware of this costume that she's laboring over for weeks and weeks. And if she wasn't, if there were other siblings there, older siblings there, that people are coming and going out of each other's bedrooms and talking and this and that. Somebody would have known about the making of the costume, which then I would assume would lead to a conversation about the party. However, that seems to not be the case. That's not, according to her mom didn't know. So search parties are, ongoing, extending from the farm into neighboring areas. There's tons of volunteers. There's Facebook groups that have been coordinated. Really, eventually, thousands of people were involved, which again confuses me based on the population of maybe. But I can only assume that people from nearby towns, neighboring towns, were involved. Missing persons posters were distributed widely. And the media was, of course, urging people to look out specifically for a poison ivy costume. It's a very distinct look that this victim, Chelsea, potential victim, well, she's a victim of something at this point, is wearing. And so she was described as a 5'7" blonde woman, average build, with an anchor tattoo behind her right ear. Tip lines were established, rewards were offered. I mean, the whole community was very, very invested in and committed to finding her. And Detectives Brian Schroka and Mike Predmore were the lead investigators on this case. They were obviously involved in the searches. They were searching neighboring farms, looking for clues. But this was a really tough one because, which I'd imagine is the case with any crime that occurs on or around Halloween, because Chelsea disappeared from a party that not only were there 800 people, but there were 800 people dressed in costumes. So like identifying witnesses, suspects, even identifying who exactly was at the party was a huge challenge. But they did the best they could. The detectives did the best they could. They talked to as many people as they could get in touch with that they, were told were at the party. There were 6 people specifically that they spoke to that informed detectives. Each of these 6 people said that they had let Chelsea use their cell phone to make calls at the party. One of the people said, I think she called her friend Penny. And so she used one person's phone to call Penny and ask if she could get a ride. And Penny apparently said, I can't drive because I'm too drunk. And later, Penny has expressed that this was one of her biggest regrets, especially since Chelsea then called her a second time that night from somebody else's phone. Other people from the party that detectives spoke to reported seeing Chelsea crying, reported seeing Chelsea look uncomfortable, saying that she was cold. She had told several people that her friends left her and she didn't have a ride home. She was, according to witnesses at the party who did see her or interact with her, she was visibly distressed. She was visibly upset and felt that she had been abandoned because she had. Beyond this, though, the leads in this investigation were kind of stalling. There was not much happening. Until a few days later, a woman contacted the police and said that her son saw Chelsea at 3:30 a.m. on the night of the party. He was certain that it was her because he said that he discussed her costume with her. He remembered mentioning that he's allergic to poison ivy to Chelsea. He said that Chelsea appeared a little bit tipsy, but not too drunk. And he said that she was with a man who seemed familiar to her. The man was comforting her and speaking as if they were friends. He said that Chelsea did seem a little frazzled because she mentioned she couldn't find her friends and that she was ready to go home, but that this man was apparently comforting her. The son described this man as tall and slender with swoopy emo hair and glasses, and said that he saw the man and Chelsea leave together after he was speaking to them. Apparently, he was able to give a pretty good description. So a sketch artist did a composite sketch and they released that to the media immediately. After which, of course, they were bombarded with phone calls and tips because, tall and slim with swoopy emo hair and glasses, like every emo hipster kind of bro that you can think of, this is who he looked like. Like he was, many people felt that they knew the man in this sketch. And Big Mike actually contacted the police and said, I know the man in this sketch. He said, well, I'm not sure exactly who it is, but there are a few different band members from a band called Milwaukee who played at the, band members from a band from Milwaukee, not a band called Milwaukee, who played at the party, and they resembled the sketch. He couldn't point to just one person though, because so many people in these 8 bands that played at his party looked kind of like douchey emo bros. He said the bass player, the drummer, and the lead singer of this band from Milwaukee specifically all looked like this, and suggested to the police that they should try and find these band members and talk to them. The FBI was involved at this point, apparently reached out to these band members, but all their alibis ended up checking out. So now, even after Big Mike has been totally helpful, has let everyone set up camp on his mom's property, he's been cooperating with the police, telling them everything he knows. He suggested that they talk to these band members. Still, Chelsea's family and some of the police still believed that Mike was involved and that he knew where Chelsea was. He was involved in like one way or another. So they decided to bring him in officially for questioning. The police asked for his consent to search his house. And although he was cooperating, answering questions, sharing what he knew, he declined to allow them to search his house without a warrant. He said, not without a warrant. And so police, of course, obtained a warrant and arrived with a SWAT team to his house, and he had no choice but to let them in. So they conducted a thorough search of his house, inspected all the fire pits on the property. I mean, they were looking for any bit of evidence that might point to Big Mike knowing where Chelsea was. But they didn't find any. Nothing. They found nothing suspicious in Mike's house, on his property, nothing. But they still weren't ready to kind of let him go completely. I mean, he was free. They weren't holding him, but he was still definitely the main person of interest at this point in the investigation. So once again, the investigation is kind of stalling a little bit after they get nothing from Big Mike or searching his home, until Detective Predmore receives a tip about a man named Harlan Bird. With nothing really else to go on, the detectives were like, well, let's bring him in. So they bring in this Harlan Bird for an interview. I don't know exactly what the tip was, but obviously something suspicious. Harlan came in for questioning. He said, yeah, I was at the party that night with my best friend. And he said, while I was there, I did see two men harassing a woman in the kind of parking area. They were pushing her, kind of almost assaulting her. And the woman was crying and yelling for help. And Harlan said, I did intervene and she had been pushed to the ground and I helped her up. He said, and I think it might have been Chelsea Bruck, because he described her appearance very precisely to the detectives, and that was what she looked like. He also said, I think I got a little bit of her blood on my shirt because she had kind of rested her face on my shoulder for a second. And so I don't want to be a suspect for anything. I don't want to be accused of hurting her. I just want you to know that I was actually trying to help her. And he said, so once I got her up and away from these guys and she was safe, there was a 4-door red car sitting right there. And the door was open. So I didn't know whose car it was, but I just put her in it. And I told her to sit there and wait. And I was going to go into the party and find someone who knew her. He went into the party, and the party was kind of everywhere. So into the party, I don't think it necessarily means going into the house. I do believe people were in the house. People were all over the field, under the tents. So he went into the party, looked for someone, couldn't find anyone who knew her, and told police that when he came back out, both the car and Chelsea were gone. Detectives were like, okay, well, tell us more about the blood. And do you still have this shirt with the blood on it? He said, yeah, I still have the shirt, but my girlfriend / fiance maybe washed it already. And he said, if it's been washed, can you still get blood evidence off of it? And they said, no, we cannot. And apparently his response was, oh, bummer. Well, wish I could help. And they were just suspicious of him still, because he had said that she got blood on his shirt, and he thought maybe it was from a bloody nose or something, but he admitted that he didn't actually see her having a bloody nose. He just assumed that based on the fact that he had a little bit of blood on her shirt, which is to me, a weird thing to assume. Why would you assume it's a bloody nose? Why didn't she have a cut on her face, on her hand, on her, I don't know. And on top of which, a bloody nose is usually not just a teeny bit of blood. It's a bloody nose. I mean, if anybody's had a bloody nose, I used to get them bloody noses so badly. My grandma took me to the hospital when I was little because it was nonstop. I mean, bloody noses bleed a lot. So detectives are just not really buying this story. And they kind of felt that he was, purposefully crafting this narrative that really made him look like a hero. And it just very conveniently explained why he might have had blood on his shirt from her. They also found it a little bit hard to believe that there were two men assaulting a woman just right in the middle of a party and no one else did anything. And at first I thought, well, no, that happens all the time. But I do think that in public places, if someone is assaulted or gets beat up or whatnot, I think people are less willing to help for fear of their own safety. But at a private party, I don't know, I feel like people would be more inclined to intervene, especially two men ganging up on a woman. I don't know. So I do agree with the police on that. That seems just weird. So they asked him very directly, point blank, have you harmed or abducted Chelsea? And he strongly denied it. He repeatedly said, no way, no way. And so they went through his story again and they found some more inconsistencies and it just wasn't adding up. And so finally they said, did you even actually see Chelsea at the party? And that's when he admitted, no. He made the whole thing up because he wanted to look like a hero. He wanted to look like somebody who had done something good. So police let him go. I can't understand people who do that. It's very weird to me. Like, why would you do so that you can look? I just can't. It needs no explanation. It's just so fucked up. So about a week after her disappearance, there was a huge prayer vigil with her family and friends. And at this time, the search was moved from Big Mike's farm to a vacant bank where they set up headquarters for the search. And weeks went by, and now we're kind of closing in on the end of 2014. And police are frustrated until a woman from Toledo named Carrie Carr reached out to the police, and she said that her ex-boyfriend had confessed to killing Chelsea. According to Carrie, her ex told her that he was at the party, he left with Chelsea, and he ended up killing her and dumping her body in a Toledo cemetery. Carrie said that he had also threatened to kill her, to kill Carrie, if she told anybody, and so Carrie broke up with him immediately. Detectives apparently noted that Carrie sounded extremely frightened of her ex, and she kept insisting that he be arrested. And she continued to ask police, and she was concerned, what happens if you question him and then release him? What's going to happen? Is that a possibility? Could that happen? They were like, well, yeah, yes, of course that could happen, but not if he's guilty, not if this checks out. Sorry, I just lost my place in my very long, big notes. Here we go. So the detectives got a hold of her ex-boyfriend and brought him in for questioning. And they didn't tell him that Carrie was the one who accused him, but he still brought Carrie up and said, we've been having a lot of problems, and I don't know who told you this, but I'm guessing it was my ex-girlfriend because she just wants me to be arrested because we've been fighting. So detectives brought Carrie back in and decided to question her again. And finally, after a lengthy interview, she confessed that she lied and her ex had nothing to do with it, and she made it up so that he would be arrested. Which is just what is wrong with people? What? It blows my mind to see a story on the news or something, or a flyer for a missing girl or whatever, and be like, I think I'll insert myself in that investigation and just make some shit up to make it more difficult. It's just so awful. Luckily, Carrie was arrested for making false statements to the police, and so was Harlan. Harlan, who I talked about earlier, he had also been arrested for lying to investigators. Thank goodness. Now, flash forward a little bit to Sunday, March 22nd, 2015. A woman named Cheryl Retzla contacted the police after finding something on the edge of her property. Her property was about 2.5 miles away from where Big Mike's party had been. So she had been out cleaning up winter debris along the tree line of her property. And she had discovered a red, flat, leather Mary Jane looking shoe. So she had initially placed the shoe in a trash bag with a bunch of other debris, and she took the trash bag home. Apparently this was like a thing on her property, debris, things that people either threw out of their cars, fell off of trucks. I don't know, things like that. Because her husband, when she got home with the bag, he was like, well, tell me about what you found. Did you get anything good this year in the haul? So, which leads me to believe that every year she'd go out there and clean, and maybe sometimes she'd find some treasures, I love I love going to Goodwill and finding other people's things. So maybe kind of like that. So she did. She was like, no, I found this and this. I found this shoe. And he was like, wait, a shoe? Can I see it? And so he looked at the shoe and he said, do you think this could belong to that girl? And Cheryl hadn't made that connection, but she was like, that's a good idea. So she called the police. The police came, got the shoe, and the next day sent a photo of the shoe to Chelsea's mother. And Chelsea's mom said, that is definitely her shoe. So about a month later, there was just one shoe though. And they weren't able to really collect any DNA, nothing. The shoe told them not much, except for that if Chelsea was still alive, she was missing a shoe. So on Sunday, April 5th, about a month later, a man named Eric Assab and his friend were collecting scrap metal from an abandoned building. And they were in this pretty collapsed, crappy, shitty, abandoned building that was about 10 miles away from Big Mike's party. And that's when Eric discovered something a bit unusual. He at first thought it was a plant, but when he looked closer, he realized it was not a plant. It was the costume that Chelsea had been wearing, the leotard with all the leaves sewed onto it. So it could look very easily like a plant. And then right next to it, he found a plum-colored wig. Now, when he found this, he was unaware of Chelsea's case. He didn't know anything about it. He hadn't seen this on the news. So him and his friend saw it, and they were like, oh, a plant. And they're, oh, it's just a costume. All right, a costume, Fine. So they left it. They didn't think anything of it. He did at the time pick it up. When he found it, he picked it up and was like, yeah, kind of weird. Whatever. Put it back down. You're in an abandoned building. Who knows what you're going to find? But about a week later, he saw a missing persons poster with the costume on it. And he was like, oh shit. What if the police find this costume and my fingerprints or my DNA is on it? So he was very concerned that he would be connected to this case that he didn't even know anything about. So he called his sister, explained the whole situation. She was like, if you don't call the police and report it, I will. So he reported what he found to the police. And police went to the abandoned building, collected the costume, noticed that it had been torn at the straps, at the shoulder straps and in the crotch area. Because remember, it was a leotard. So for men who don't know what a leotard is, and that's very sexist of me to assume, but I'm going to assume it anyways. If you don't know what a leotard is, it's basically a one-piece bathing suit, but used for dance. Ballerinas wear a leotard. So the costume was sent to the state crime lab to be analyzed. And while that was happening, police, investigators, everyone is conducting a very thorough search of the building, the surrounding area. For days, day and night. They definitely brought Eric in for questioning because the fact that he found it and waited a week, which he told police, it didn't look great. But he told them, he said, I didn't go to that party. He said, but the mother of my baby does live on the same road that the shoe was found on. And he was like, I just don't want you to find connections and think I'm hiding things. Because he was like, yeah, my baby mama, I hate saying that. I hate it. But it rolls off the tongue easier than my baby's mother. Well, maybe it doesn't actually. I'm going to say my baby's mother. So he told the police my baby's mother lives on the same road that you found that shoe on. Because, once he saw the flyer, the missing persons flyer, and he realized he had seen the costume, obviously now he knows about the case. And they were like, oh, okay, well, does she have something to do with this? He said, no, but I don't want you to find that out tomorrow and then think I was keeping it from you. So I'm just telling you everything. He said the night that Chelsea went missing, he was at home with his daughter. He offered to give his DNA, which he did end up giving. And police were like, okay, well, it all seems to check out. So we're going to let you go. He wasn't a suspect. Then police realized that the abandoned building where the costume and wig were found was less than 100 yards from Harlan Bird's house. 100 yards. He lived in a mobile home directly across the street from this abandoned building, which is, kind of, certainly could be coincidence, but also doesn't look great because Harlan was, aside from Big Mike, kind of the initial suspect. So they called him back in. He agreed, but this time he showed up with his attorney. He denied any involvement, repeatedly continued to say that he was innocent. And he said, yes, I've been to the abandoned building before. Of course I have. I live across the street. But it wasn't me. Someone must be trying to frame me. He insisted that he never even saw Chelsea the night of the party. He said, I made everything up. I'm telling you, I made the whole thing up. He did agree to take a polygraph test and provide a DNA sample, and he passed the polygraph. So he was once again let go, which seems like really bad luck for this guy. But there is nothing really tying him. And then April 24th, so just several weeks after the leotard was found, about 7 miles from Big Mike's house and where the party was, a man named John Marcone was driving his dump truck into a construction site. And this construction site was actually on his property. So he was in the process of building a home from the ground up for his family on his property. And so there's a lot of construction happening. He was collecting fill for the construction, which I don't know exactly what that means, but fine. I don't think it's that pertinent. When his truck kind of got stuck in some wet mud. So he got out of his truck, kind of walked to the back of his truck to see how bad is it stuck? What do I need to do? And he's looking around. How far does this mud go? And then he saw something kind of weird on the edge of his property, walked a little bit closer, and then he realized it was a dead body. He was actually on the phone with his wife when he made this discovery. He was like, hon, I got to call you back. And he immediately called the authorities, and, very quickly, detectives, the crime lab, all the investigators, everybody was there on the scene. It was a body. It was largely skeletal, which would make sense if this was indeed Chelsea, because it had been about 6 months since she disappeared. So even though it was mostly skeletal, there was still some skin on the chest area, hands and leg, and a little bit of long blonde hair was still attached to the skull. The body looked like it had been partially covered with kind of small logs and branches. It looked like someone had purposefully tried to cover it up. And there was one single artificial ivy leaf found near the body, which, before even testing anything, was a pretty good indication that this was Chelsea. So detectives quickly informed her family, because they wanted to make sure that her family knew about it before it ever hit the media. Media is already arriving at the scene now. Important to note that John Marcone, even though he's the one who found the remains, he was never considered a suspect. And the following day, a forensic anthropologist was called in for dental records, and those dental records confirmed that it was indeed 22-year-old Chelsea Bruck. Now, investigators were able to collect male DNA from the leotard. Took a while because like weeks went by, they found the body. And then after they found the body, they were apparently, if this timeline is correct, able to pull some DNA, which they entered into CODIS, but no matches were found. They did use the DNA to compare it to Eric and Harlan, which they were both pretty much cleared, but this officially cleared them. And so with this new DNA evidence, they revisited everyone that they had interviewed from the party. You know, they're going through everyone they had spoken to from the party and asked to collect DNA from all of them so that they could compare it against this DNA that they found. And there was one person specifically that they definitely wanted DNA from, and that was Big Mike. But he refused. He said, I don't want to provide DNA. I don't want my DNA in a database. I'm not a criminal, and I don't want my DNA out there. And I do think that makes him look guilty, but I think Jenna and myself have talked about this on much earlier episodes quite a bit. Like, neither of us have participated in those, 23andMe or whatever, like DNA thing. Like, I don't want my DNA out there. I'm not planning to commit a crime, but your DNA out there, like if you do one of those, sorry for everyone who's done one, your DNA is out there in the world somewhere in some database. And as I know we've had stories that have connected and found killers, like because they had given their DNA, or a family member, like an extended family member, had participated in one of those 23andMe ancestry type things, and that led the police back to them. So I get it. I do. I get it. So it, after finding the body, obviously went to the medical examiner, but it did take a while to get any information about her cause of death. It took almost a month just because the remains were so deteriorated. But after about a month, the ME did have a cause of death for Chelsea, which was blunt force trauma to the face and head. The ME said there were several severe facial injuries sustained around her skull. The detective even said when they found her, they could automatically see that the jaw had been broken. Her jaw had been broken. She had severe fractures to her jaw and nose, and specifically her eye sockets. There were a lot of fractures to her eye sockets, which are, it pains me to read. Now, the detectives kept this completely secret. They did not release this information to the public, and they did not even release this information to Chelsea's family, at least at this point, because why? Like, it's just painful. And meanwhile, Chelsea's family was finally able to have a private funeral for Chelsea. And then in September, the man who found Chelsea's body initially, John Marcone, he called the sheriff's office again. He said he was excavating his property because, remember, he's building a house there. And he found a red shoe that he thought might match the one they already had. So detectives went out to collect it. They also decided to kind of look more on his property now, which I believe they did when they found the body, but obviously missed this. So it was the other shoe. And they also found the green tights that she was wearing that night when they went out to get the shoe. But these two things didn't offer really anything else. They couldn't tell anything else from these at this point. So once again, the investigation is kind of stalling. Now, early on in the investigation, they had received a tip about a man showing up at a house on War Road, W-A-R, War Road. Now, War Road is where that initial red shoe was found by that woman cleaning up debris. So at some point early in the investigation, the police got a call about a man showed up at a house on War Road at like 3 a.m. He reportedly knocked on a random person's door and asked if he could stay there because he was coming from the party. He was like, I'm assuming he's probably intoxicated in some way. If you're knocking on random people's doors asking to sleep there, the homeowner refused, said, get the hell out of here. And this man then apparently fell asleep on the porch of this person's house for a short time, then eventually left. But he did leave behind a vest that had a pocket knife and some rope in it. He came back at a later date to get his, and knocked on the door and was like, hey, I fell asleep out here. Did I leave my vest? The homeowner gave it back to him, which is shocking to me. I would never open the door for that person again. So investigators decided to review the footage. So they had footage from the party. Not that there were necessarily CCTV cameras or anything, but 2014, everybody's got a cell phone. So, they're collecting whatever digital data they can from everybody. And again, remember, Becky had Chelsea's phone. That's why cell phone records and cell phone pings never came into this, because Chelsea didn't have any cell phone with her. So investigators start going through footage from the party, and they, on various people's footage, they saw quick clips of a man that was wearing that same vest with rope and other items supposedly inside. So in June of 2016, police, that date seems off, but we're going to go with it. Police released images of a white man with a mustache from the Halloween party to the media. And after these photos, that they were interested in him. He was a person of interest. They want to talk to him. And so after these photos were released, the man came forward. He came to the police station. He said, hey, that's me in those pictures. I was really, really drunk at that party. I don't remember anything. So police collected his DNA and scheduled a polygraph test. However, on the day of the scheduled polygraph, the crime lab contacted the police and said, we got a breakthrough. The male DNA from Chelsea's ripped leotard did match someone in CODIS. It just came through. And it wasn't the man with the mustache and the vest who fell asleep on someone's porch. It was someone who had recently been arrested and whose DNA had just been added to the database. So luckily, the crime lab was continuing to run this DNA, they ran it through months before when they had found it. And now they're running it through again just to keep up on the case. Thank God, because the match, it had just come through. So it wasn't Harlan. It wasn't Eric. It wasn't this man with the mustache. It didn't match any of the men who police had questioned and collected DNA from. The DNA from the bloody and ripped leotard was identified as belonging to 27-year-old Daniel Clay. So who's Daniel Clay? Daniel Clay was a drifter with no permanent home address. He was originally from Monroe County, which is where the town of Maybe is. And he was, currently living there supposedly, but he was unemployed. He had a long history of criminal behavior. He had been arrested multiple times for assault and battery, credit card fraud, theft, various other minor offenses. Assault and battery is obviously not minor, but, some minor theft and things like that. And in May of 2016, he was arrested for stealing a backpack containing tattoo equipment, and he was charged with larceny. So this arrest is what led to his DNA being added to the system, luckily, because so previously the law in Indiana, which is, I guess, where he was arrested, only allowed DNA collection from convicted felons, but that law had recently changed and expanded to include anyone arrested for a felony, which is what enabled this to happen. So larceny was a felony that he was arrested for. His DNA got put into the system, matched in CODIS. And in July of 2016, they went to go look for him and went to find him. But he was supposedly homeless at this time. He had 2 warrants out for his arrest for unpaid child support. And so they were like, well, if we can find him, we're going to arrest him for the child support warrants. And we're not even going to mention the murder, just to get him in here and see what we can find out. So they they thought he might be staying with a new girlfriend who was named Kelly Richter. And so they began surveilling this home that belonged to Kelly, where Daniel was supposedly staying. And they saw him coming and going, and so they knew he was staying there at this point. They just wanted to make sure. So finally, they decided to go knock on the door. They were not getting any response. And that's because Daniel Clay tried to escape out the back of the property, but police were back there waiting for him and arrested him. Apparently, when the police pulled up and were walking up to the door, Daniel noticed that, and his girlfriend wasn't home at the time, but his girlfriend's friend was there and was showering. And she said that Daniel had burst into the bathroom, was panicking. He was having a full-blown panic attack. He's like, I'm going to prison. Do not answer the door. And then Kelly, the girlfriend, arrived home a bit later after they had already apprehended Daniel. And she was very cooperative. She said, go ahead, search my residence. And during the search, police found Chelsea's underwear, jewelry, and some personal items that Daniel had kept, as trophies. So in his initial interview, Daniel denied knowing Chelsea. He claimed he'd never seen her, never met her. But then detectives brought up, oh, there goes Indiana. Sorry, guys. Amazon is leaving a package and Indiana's losing her mind. Is this fun or what? All right, guys. That's still Indiana. She goes from barking to pant "Arr!" Guys, it's okay. Come here. You okay? Yeah, it's okay. All right. Sorry about that. So even though he initially denied knowing Chelsea, he said he'd never seen her, never met her. Detectives then were like, well, we have DNA evidence. And he immediately changed his story. He was like, okay. I did have sex with her, but it was consensual. Which is funny because they didn't say what kind of DNA evidence. He immediately, as I think a lot of people do, assumed that whatever DNA evidence they found was semen. And so he, before even hearing anything else from them, he immediately confessed to having sexual contact with her. And then detectives were like, well, the DNA wasn't semen. It was skin cell DNA that we found on her leotard in the areas where it was violently torn at the straps and the crotch. And so at this point, Daniel's like, oh, I think he's kind of fallen silent. So Detective Predmore was like, well, you might not know this, but Chelsea's mom told us that she has a very rare condition called brittle bone disease. So now Daniel's story shifts again. And he says, okay, here's what happened. I saw Chelsea walking down the road after the party while I was leaving. And I pulled up next to her and asked her if she wanted a ride because she looked kind of sad. She was carrying her wig. She said she did, and she got into the car. So we drove down the road a little bit, and then we proceeded to have sex. And then we had sex again. And this time, the second time, she wanted it rough. She wanted me to hit her. She wanted me to strangle her and choke her. And he said, and I did, I did. I choked her until she went limp. But I was just doing what she asked. I wasn't trying to kill her. And something must have happened because of her brittle bone disease. He said, I didn't even feel like I choked her that hard. She should have been able to breathe. It could have more than 20 or 30 seconds. And if I had known she was still alive, I would have just let her go. But he thought she wasn't alive. So he attempted CPR, excuse me. He claimed he was hitting her on the chest, which is not really how you do CPR, I don't think. But he was trying to revive her. He panicked after she went limp, couldn't revive her. So he put her in the back of his car, and he didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to do. He said, I just drove around for 30 or 40 minutes. And then I panicked and I had to get rid of her. It was an accident. He's like, so I dumped her. I put her body on the side of the road and I covered it up. It wasn't on the side of the road, but on this guy's property. And so when they asked him, okay, well, how did her costume end up in like an abandoned building 10 miles away? Daniel had no answer. He was like, I don't know. I have no idea. Like it was consensual sex. She wanted it rough and I accidentally choked her and that was it. It was an accident. So he was arrested. And sorry, I have like a little tidbit of information that's not really pertinent, but I'll share it anyway since I did such a long, awkward pause there. So this is kind of weird small world, like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon type thing, that Chelsea's friend Becky, remember, who they went to the party together and worked at the restaurant together. Becky found out about this arrest from another coworker at the restaurant, Jessica, who happened to be the mother of one of Daniel Clay's children. So Daniel Clay, who was just arrested for killing Chelsea, has a kid with Jessica who worked at the restaurant with Chelsea and Becky. I mean, I guess that's not really that coincidental in a very, very small town. So Daniel Clay was going to plead not guilty because he was sticking to the story that it was accidental. He did not murder her. He said, I choked her for 20, maybe 30 seconds and boom, she died. And that doesn't even make sense, as the medical examiner made very clear and disputed at the trial that, while there wasn't sadly enough of Chelsea's body left to determine definitively if she had been asphyxiated, strangled, but the ME was able to determine that she was severely beaten for sure. And the fact that he said he only choked her for 20 to 30 seconds is completely implausible. The ME explained that strangulation is not a quick process. In order to actually kill somebody, you must apply constant pressure to the neck for, 20 to 30 seconds just for unconsciousness, not to kill them. An additional 2 to 4 minutes of sustained pressure to actually kill somebody, which is just awful. Daniel also claimed that at the trial that Chelsea had removed her poison ivy costume herself before they had sex, and that she was naked when this happened, and he doesn't know what happened to her costume. So like they had sex in his car. So she took her costume off, got completely naked on her own. They had sex. He accidentally kills her and then disposes of her body. But what? The poison ivy costume, like even if he threw it out the window, it would be kind of impossible for it to end up inside of an abandoned building. But the fact that he claimed that she removed the costume, this was also kind of dismissed in the trial because the costume was found torn, ripped at the straps and at the crotch. There's no way, first of all, that Chelsea would have ripped her costume off. I mean, it wasn't, I can't imagine that Daniel was, she was dying to have sex with him so much, this random man, that she just had to rip her costume off that she spent weeks making. No way. Aside from the fact that the costume had a significant amount of blood on the inside, which indicated that she had probably been beaten while wearing the costume, in order for the blood to be all over the inside of it. So like, he's saying we were having sex. She was naked. She took the costume off herself. I choked her and then she died. But like, okay, then how did the costume get ripped? Why was there blood stains on the inside of the costume? Another bit of information that just contributed to Daniel looking guilty is Jessica, the woman who worked with Chelsea at the restaurant and had a child with Daniel, said that she remembered Clay and someone else approaching a group of people that she was standing in. She was at the party. She was standing there. Chelsea was standing there. And she said that, yeah, Daniel and another guy like approached us, but she couldn't remember if any conversation occurred between Daniel and Chelsea. She said she briefly smoked pot with Daniel later that night. And the last time she saw either of them was 1 or 1:30, Chelsea or Daniel at that party. She said in the many months, so that just shows that like Daniel, it just confirms that Daniel was at that party and was aware of Chelsea because he walked up to, her in this group. Obviously they all knew each other. And so in the months since Chelsea's disappearance, Jessica, Daniel's baby's mother, doesn't recall Daniel saying anything about Chelsea. However, the day that he was arrested, she did receive 2 voicemails from him while she was at work. And he basically said, "I'm extremely, extremely sorry. I fucked up big time and I'm going to be gone for a really long time." And she testified to that. Unfortunately, this is just so sad. Throughout the trials, Chelsea's sexual history was, of course, scrutinized in the courtroom. The defense used this as kind of their primary thing, arguing to examine her sexual past to prove that she had a preference for rough sex. The judge eventually kind of put the kibosh on this, but her friends and family were still subject to being asked about her sexual preferences. And that just must have been so, your dead friend, daughter, sister, and you're having to think about like their sexual preferences. I don't even want to think about that about my friends or my sister when we're alive, let alone when you're grieving the fact that they're gone. Daniel also took the stand in his own defense, maintained his narrative that her death was completely accidental. And on the stand, he even went as far as to say, when it happened, I sobbed. I've never been in that situation before. What was I supposed to do? He got like all, emotional and teary and like, poor me, it was an accident. Like he was trying to paint himself as the victim, which, didn't really go over well with anybody. Because on May 16th, 2017, the jury reached a verdict. It was interesting. It was a jury. There was only one man and all the rest women on the jury. So they found him not guilty of first-degree murder. And when I first read that, I was like, what the fuck? But it's because they wanted to convict him of something called open murder or felony murder, because that charge indicated that he didn't only kill her, but he did so while sexually assaulting her. So it's like a heavier charge, I guess. And he was also found guilty of concealing a dead body. And I think this is, I don't know who wrote this. I don't know if the jury wrote this, if the judge wrote this, but it hits home. Not that the whole story doesn't, but it hits home with kind of explaining what she went through. And so this is a direct quote that I found in some of the court papers. In finding the defendant guilty, the jury relied on facts and reasonable inferences that Chelsea Bruck was a 22-year-old woman who was vulnerable, alone in the middle of the night with no phone, that she suffered massive blunt force injuries to her face, that she was wearing her costume when she was beaten and bloodied, that after she was beaten, both straps and the crotch of her handmade costume were severed, and then her costume was forcefully removed from her body, that her tights were found inside out near her body, and that her naked body was concealed in the woods. That defendant's narrative was incredible and unsupported by any physical, documentary, or testimonial evidence, and that in relation to Chelsea Bruck's death, the defendant described himself as, quote, a fucking monster. And the judge on this case said, I spent 10 days in trial with Mr. Clay, and I listened to countless hours of him changing his story every time the detectives questioned him or brought up something new. It was very clear to me, Mr. Clay, you are a liar, a rapist, and a killer. You are not this good Samaritan that had sex with this girl and tried to save her. And I thought that was good of the judge to clearly state that. Daniel Clay was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He also apparently either went through right before or right after another trial because he was found to have sexually assaulted another woman before Chelsea. So this was not a one-time thing. This was not an accident. This was a predator that would have very likely done this again. During the victim impact statements, Chelsea's mother sat just one table away from Daniel, and she said, "I forgive you." She explained that if she didn't forgive him and she just tried to forget him, it would feel as though Chelsea's life had no meaning. She expressed that forgiving him was a way for her to find peace and move forward with her life. And then she handed Daniel a Bible and said that she hoped it would help to save him. He accepted the Bible and stated something to the effect of like, "I will take this and hold on to it as long as I'm able to and read it." He also said he was sorry for what he had put her through, which is just like such bullshit. I don't know. I've never lost somebody, as I've said many times, to being murdered. Thank goodness. I don't know if I would even want to hear an apology from whoever murdered them. I wouldn't. I don't want that. And we'll end on this quote from Chelsea's mom, where she says, "The condition of our world is not the way our Lord intended it to be. If you see something, please say something." Also, another important lesson from the loss of Chelsea: don't leave your friends alone. If you go somewhere, anywhere as a group, please leave with that same group. And I think that's really good. Good advice and a good note to end on. I'm really trying to not linger at the end of these episodes and talk forever about absolute nonsense, because nobody needs that. The story's done. We can say goodbye. But I will say that as always, I hope I did this story justice. Feels weird to say I hope you enjoyed it, but I guess I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, thoughts are with Chelsea's family and friends. And I hope you guys are having a fantastic October. I'm so excited. I don't know, like magically my Instagram messages are back. So I'm excited to get into those and hear from you guys. Keep sending your movie recommendations, your Halloween or spooky or October movie recommendations. And as far as that meetup, guys, like still planning to do it. I think I'm going to bring Mark with me. But again, I'm waiting. I want to go somewhere where we can all sit outside, and I'm not sitting outside in 90 degrees. So we'll just keep an eye on the weather, and it'll probably be a spur of the moment thing. You know me. That's how we do it. So thank you for listening. Email, voicemail, DM, leave a review on Apple, tell a friend to listen to the podcast, and tell me how your fall's going. What fun fall things are you doing? Or send me pictures. I would love to see pictures of anybody's Halloween decorations, especially if I could reshare them with everyone. Okay, that's it. This is already getting too long of a goodbye. Love you all so, so much. And talk to you soon. Bye, guys. Death by Southwest.